this is the last game of this set. It's a pure grouping game, and it's actually this one's kind of tough too. So really, out of the 4 games in this set, really the first one was the one that you should have rushed through really quickly, and then spend about 10 minutes on each of the next 3 games. That adds up to a total of 35 minutes. Okay, so let's read the stimulus. There are exactly 3 recycling centers in Rivertown, 1, 2, and 3. So that's how we know this is a grouping game. Already they've told us our game board, which is just the 3 groups over here: Group 1, Group 2, and Group 3. So let's write out our game board. We don't really know what we're putting in here yet, but if we keep reading, there are exactly 5 kinds of materials recycled at these recycling centers: glass, newsprint, plastic, T, and W. So just write out G, N, P, T, and W. So you might be wondering why I always do this game piece 3 to a line then break. Is because I want to be able to capture all of it with one glance. If I just keep it writing it out into a straight line like that, especially when some games have like 8 items, I have to take a couple of looks to capture all of it. Here, if I just keep it all together condensed, I can just capture it once with one glance. Okay, so these are our game pieces, and what we're going to do is we're going to put the game pieces, does P go into here? Does it go into here? What happens with it? Right, so game pieces, game board. Now let's keep reading. Each recycling center recycles at least 2, but no more than 3. Right, so at this point, before reading that, we're like, okay, is 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or all 5, right? So now they're telling us at least 2, which we're going to represent by drawing in 2 slots. The slots are important because slots are placeholders. They're here to remind you, hey, this is empty, right? You can't leave me empty. You have to put something in here. But max 3. So I'm going to write down as a separate rule. Rule number 1, max is 3. So really, 1 more, and then 1 more, and then it's closed. 1 more, and then it's closed. 1 more, and then it's closed. Like that, right? Okay, so let's keep reading. The following conditions must hold. So here's the first rule, or really second rule. Second rule says, any recycling centers that recycles wood also recycles newsprint. So this one, you just got to make sure you're good on your conditional logic lessons, right? So your foundations conditional logic has to be excellent. Any is group 1, introduces sufficient conditions. So if it recycles wood, it recycles newsprint. If W, then N. Not this thing here. If you wrote this thing here, you're just completely screwed for this game, right? This one says if you see wood in say 2, then you have to put newsprint in here. But if you just see newsprint in 3, you don't have to put wood here. That's not right. You don't have to put wood into here. Newsprint can be there by itself. It's wood that can't be there by itself, right? If there's wood, there's got to be newsprint. So that's 2, right? And of course, the contrapositive N slash implies W slash. I'm not writing out because I expect you to be really good at conditional logic and just be able to intuitively understand the contrapositive. If not, review your lessons on logic. See, the third rule does the same thing. Every kind of material that 2 recycles is also recycled in 1. So if it's in 2, then it's in 1. Every is also sufficiency indicators. Group 1 introduces sufficient conditions. So if it's in 2, it's in 1, which means whatever I put into here, I put a circle in here, a circle goes in here. I put an X in here, an X goes in here, right? 2 goes into 1 is what that means. Again, not 1 goes into 2. Not if I put an X into here, I put an X in here. I can have an X in here and then not X in here, right? That's possible. So that's 2 and 3 are really heavily testing your understanding of conditional logic. But now you got to think about this, right? So who could have more? The options are either have 2 items or have 3 items, right? So who could have more? It's group 1 that can have more. You can't have group 2 have more than group 1. You can't be like, oh, I'm going to give group 2 3 items, and I'm going to give group 1 only 2 items. Why is that not okay? Because everything that goes in here filters into here. So you see, now you're 1 spot too short. But we could do the opposite. We could do three items into here and then 2 items into here, close that off, because everything in here filters into here. And that's okay, we have enough space. And this one is free to be whatever he wants, right? It's because it's not the case that everything into here filters into here. That's not what's happening, right? That's why it's okay to have group 1 with 3 items and group 2 with 2 items. But now, of course, if both of them have 3 items, right, then of course they're exactly the same, right? Just because they have to be exactly the same. Both of them have 3 items. How else are you going to satisfy this rule? Or, alternatively, if both of them have 2 items, right, then same thing. Then they both have to be the same. Then it does become a biconditional. Then 1 does push over into 2, right? So if any of that was confusing for you, you need to review your lesson on conditional logic and the biconditional, which is an advanced lesson. Okay, next up we have only 1 recycles plastic. And again, I'm just going to write this rule out before I keep reading because that's a rule in and of itself. There's exactly 1 plastic. And then rule number 5, I'll finish reading this, and that center does not recycle glass, so that's a not both. If you recycle plastic, you do not recycle glass, and same, the vice versa too. If contrapositive just reads if you recycle glass, you don't read plastic. This is your This is your classic not both relationship, positive going to negative. So in any situation, you don't get to have both P and G. Right? If you want, you can write it out like this. I would highly recommend not doing it this way because doing it this way lets you get away with not being good at reading logic, and that's a detriment. So you want to write it like this. Okay, so that's it. I mean, there's really not that much you can do here. There are plenty of options. This is a very open-ended game. You just gotta make sure every situation you run it up against these 5 rules to make sure you're not contradicting anything, and that's it. So let's take a look at the questions. Question 18 is your standard acceptable situation question. You take your rules. It's rule driven, right? You take your rules and eliminate. So max 3, minimum 2, max 3, right? So it's either 2 or 3. So you just count, and everything here looks like it's either 2 or 3. So this rule is useless. 2 says WN. So if it recycles W, it must recycle N. So you just check real quick, and you'll see here W, but no N. So that's not good. So A is gone, right? Because of this rule. Next, we have whatever's in 2 is in 1, so just make sure you dump everything from 2 into 1. So NW, okay? NT, okay? NT, N, and we're missing T, so that's not good. GT, that's fine. NPW, that's fine. So move on to the next rule. Exactly 1 P. So look for any repetition of P's. Right here, we got 2 P's over here, so E's gone. And then finally, if you have a P, you can't have a G, so that's fine. And this one, you got a P and a G, so that's not good. So that's why B is the correct answer choice. See, really, really quick, right? Same as the first question in the previous game, and same as the first question in the I think it's game 1. Just rule driven, eliminate. Right? And generally speaking, each of the rules is only good for eliminating one answer choice. 19 says, which one following complete accurate list of the recycling centers that could recycle plastic? All right, who could recycle plastic? You only have one plastic, right? You only have one. So think about that. You only have one. And combine that with what other rule? What rule do you think? Right? This one says max 3. Okay, fine. This one says W implies this is useless. 2, 1. 2, 1. Whatever goes into here also filters into here. Which means if I put a P into here, then I have to put a P into here. But that's not okay. That's not okay because I only have 1 P to go around. Right? So 1 plastic. So that therefore we know that 2 can't recycle plastic. Alright, so that means this is gone and this is gone because they have 2. They're inaccurate now. C and E are inaccurate answer choices because they include 2. Right? So then what about 1 and 3? Well, see, I'm thinking probably it's going to be 1 and 3. There's no reason to think that 1 can't recycle plastic. You might be thinking, well, what about this 1-2 rule? Well, it's what I said earlier. Maybe 1 actually has 3 items, and 2 has exactly 2 items, right? You see, so in that case, that's okay. I don't know, put WN here, WN here, and then put a T and a G here, right? And that seems to be absolutely fine, right? So this is not, I'm illustrating this. This is definitely not something I would try out. I would just choose D and I would move on because I don't see any reason why plastic can't go into 1 or 3, right? I mean, 3 seems to be totally fine. 3 has nothing to do with 1 and 2. So it's one of these luxuries that if you have time to come back and put tildes next to A and B, if I have time to come back and check, I would, but I don't know how I'm doing on time. There's still, what is that, like 4 questions I haven't answered yet, right? So you don't want to do that. You're relatively certain, choose it, move on, circle this question. If you have time, come back to it. 20 says if 2 recycles 3 kinds of material, then what must... So they're giving us new information. New information dictates that we have to copy our master game board over right next to the question and fill in this new information. So the new information they're telling us is that 2 has exactly 3 kinds of material, which means 1 now necessarily has to have exactly 3 kinds of material because whatever goes into 2 goes into 1. So now let's close out these categories, right? We're going to close them out. And they want to know about, what 3 must do. But see here, now, hopefully from the previous question 19, you still remember this relationship between rules 3 and 4. They are intimately related, right? Whatever goes into 2 goes into 1. 2 has 3 items. That means all 3 of these items are going to go into 1. They're sharing exactly the same 3 items, which means P is not going to be there. But if P is not going to be there and we know we have exactly 1 P, it has to be here. You see, it has to be here. Because where else, you can't put it anywhere else. But look, now this implicates rule number 5. P implies no G, so G's not going to be here. But then where are you going to put G? If G's not going to be in 3, you have to put it into both 1 and 2. Right? You have to, because otherwise G doesn't get recycled, and that's not okay. So that's why the answer to this, they're asking what must 3 recycle, which is P. Right? I mean, we went sort of one step too far. But not that that's detrimental. This is great. This is exactly the kind of brain muscles that you need to be flexing in order to get good at games. So what if you went one step too far? right? Okay, so good. So C is the correct answer choice for question 20. 21 says, if each recycling center recycles exactly 3, then what could be true? So same thing. So we're going to copy over our master game board right next to the question and just fill in the new information they're giving us, which is that we're going to have 3 items for each of the centers. So you just want to close this out, right? Close it out at 3 items each. Okay? So same thing, right? We just figured out from question 20 this whole deal with the P's and the G's, so you're going to write that in again. So at this point, let's take a look at the answers. I mean, not really sure what else we can figure out. We know that these two are exactly the same. Whatever they are, they're exactly the same. Okay, so A says only 2 recycles. That can't be right. Like anything that says only 2, right, or only 1, that can't be right. Because at this point, we already know that they are recycling exactly the same thing. So if you're going to try to tell me something that's only 2 or only 1, it's immediately wrong. So see, that very quickly eliminates 3 answer choices. Now we're down to 2 answer choices, right? Only 3 recycles N or only 3 recycles T. So, all right, so this is actually kind of challenging. What do we do? Could it be that only 3 recycles N? Which means, at this point you're down to 2, so you might as well try it, right? So which means that these 2 are not recycling N. They're not recycling N. But if you're not recycling N, what does that mean? See, contrapositive. No N implies no W. Okay. So you're not recycling N, you're not recycling W. So this is where you look back here and you just try to take a quick look at what your options are left. We're not. So my eyes would sort of just cover up N, cover up W, right? I'm slashing it out, but obviously you don't want to do that on your paper. No N, no W, no G because G's already there. No P because P is in 3. You can't put it in here. So then that means I only have T left. How am I gonna? I can't put T twice in here. That doesn't make any sense, right? So that's why it's actually not okay. It's completely not okay that 3 is the only thing that's recycling N, right? In fact, that tells me that N has to be here for both. So therefore, 3 recycling T must be the one that's okay. Yeah, sure, and I can see that, right? If you put T over here, and I don't know, just put W over here. W implies N, and then put another, put another N over here, right? So that seems fine. Question 22. This question tells us that 3 recycles glass. Which from following must 2 recycle? So again, we have the same situation here, where we have to copy the master game board over right next to this question and then include the premise that's specific to just this question, which is that 3 recycles glass, right? 3 recycles glass, then which of the following must 2 recycle? So if 3 is recycling glass, let's think about that. This is not recycling P anymore because P, contrapositive G implies P slash, right? So this is not recycling P anymore, which means what's going to happen to P now? Right? You still have to have exactly 1 P, so let's make that happen. We can't put P into here. We know that because P into here, rule 3 kicks, that pushes P over here, and then in which case we contradict rule 4. We can't have 2 P's. So P can't be here either. Well, it can't be here, it must be here, right? So if it must be here, think about that. We're sort of back at the same situation that we were in a couple questions ago, which is that 1 has now more items than 2, because that's the only way for us not to contradict rule number 3. Rule number 3 still holds. Everything in here still must be in here. So if now I have P into 1, right? I don't want to put in this first slot. I'll put it in this last slot, right? Because I want to remind myself that these 4 rather slots are shared. They're the same thing, right? So which means 2 also doesn't get to have 3. Doesn't get to have 3 slots. That's not possible because if it has 3 slots, then this one has to be a P, and we know that can't be a P, which means 2 only gets to have 2 slots now, right? So it goes 2, 3, 2, and I guess 2 or 3 like that, right? So then they're asking what must 2 recycle? Well, it's not going to be a G, it's not going to be a P. We already figured that out, right? You can't have like how are you going to have a G in here, right? G in here implies G pushes G over into here, in which case you run in contradiction with rule number 5 because now you have G and P together. So that's not good, right? So it's not G or P. So really it's WT, and if you look up here, it's not G, it's not P. Really, so I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, okay, I have 3 items left, and I need to choose for 2 of these options. So really, what are my combinations here? You can just really quickly go through them in your head. It's either WN, right? Or WT or TW, or actually not TW. I already wrote that. It's WN, WT, or TN. That's the third option, right? Okay, so now you can very quickly figure out like what has to go here, right? WN's okay. WN's okay because that's just rule number 2. WN, that's fine, right? WT is definitely not okay. This one's not good because W implies, right? W implies N. So you see, this is not even a real possibility. Okay, so that's gone. And what's the other possibility? TN. Well, TN's fine too, right? See, because you got to remember, N doesn't push over to W. W pushes over to N, but N can be alone by itself. So really, it's either this option or it's this option. So you can just write that in if you want to see that WN or TN. And look, either way, you have to have N, which is why B is the correct answer choice for 22. whereas T and W are could be trues. You could have T, you could have W, you don't have to have them. All right, question 23. Same thing. They tell us something new, so you have to copy over the master game board right next to your question and then include that new information. The new information here is that center 1 is the only center that recycles W, right? So 1 is the only one that gets W. So again, we're in the same situation where 1 has to have 3 and 2 therefore is closed off at 2 items, right? Because again, you can't have 3 items. If 2 has 3 items, then they're forced to have all 3 of the same items, which means 2 gets W, which means you're contradicting the premise they told you. So that's why 2 only gets 2 items. And did it tell you anything else? Which one following could be a complete accurate list of, okay, so whatever. Let's figure out all of our inferences first. If you get a W, right, that means you have to have an N, which now means, right, because the remainder of these two have to be the same. So now this rule actually does go this way. 1 does kick over into, right, 1 does kick over into 2 now, precisely because we only have two items left. So N kicks over this way, and same thing. So because these two are shared and exactly the same, it's not going to be, right? It's not going to be a P. That can't be it, because now we're going to have 2 P's, which means P gets kicked over into here, which means now G can't be here because of rule number 5. P implies no G. So if G can't be here, the only place left for G is over here, right? And G has to, of course, occupy both spots because they're the same, right? These two are the same. These two are the same. And then the only item left is T, so T goes here. So there you go. We've completely figured it out. So now they want a complete and accurate list of the kinds of materials that one of the recite. They're not specific. They're not saying, oh, it has to be center 2. Nope. They're saying one of them, right? One of them. Okay? PT. Yeah, there you go. That's this right here, PT. NW, sorry, doesn't happen. NT doesn't happen. GW doesn't happen. GT doesn't happen. So that's it. I don't see any of these. So A is the correct answer choice. So it's a pretty tough game, but it's okay if you figure out these key inferences. The key inferences being, you understand how the relationship between, all of these rules, what the relationship is. And this game really severely tests your understanding of conditionality. Do you confuse sufficient conditions for necessary conditions? If you don't, then you're golden. If you do, then this game's going to give you a lot of trouble.